I feel like there's too many books for this one video. I have 3 stacks sitting right by me. Hello everybody, welcome back to another book related video here on my channel. Today we are pretty much doing 3 videos in one. A lot of people do did I read my TBR type videos where they go through what they had for their TBR and they say yes or no if they read it or not. I kind of want to do that, but I just want to include it into this video. And then of course we are actually going to do our monthly wrap up and also our April TBR for next month. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the books. Before going over March's TBR, I'm pretty much only going to say yes or no if I did read it or not, and I'm going to kind of explain a little bit on my nose. There's not too many. I only had like 5 books I wanted to read in the month. First, we have Namesake. This is number 2 in the Fable series, or number 3 if you look on Goodreads. There's also Saints, which is 0.5. This is right after Fable, and I did read this. Then we have The Last Legacy, which is after Namesake, and I also read this one. Next, we have by Max Lucado, 6 Hours One Friday. I did read this. I did not do a bunch of the study guides in the very back, but otherwise I did do I think one of them to a point, and I tried answering the questions, but because I was doing other things like daily devotionals, I didn't finish those, but I did read the actual book part of this. I did not read this one. I picked this one afterwards, but I think because of how good the Fable series was, I then went to a Christian book, and then I was going to try and do this one. There's a lot of Russian words. I think it's more because it's fiction, and it's talking about there is, as far as I got at least, an Antov that gets basically hijacked, and it was kind of intriguing, but I only got to 3 chapters and I just was not feeling it anymore, so I did put it down. I was starting to get into a slump, I do believe. And lastly, I also tried reading 28 Summers by Ellen Hilderbrand, and right off the bat, I don't care if she was talking about like, oh well, what happened in 2020, as soon as she started talking about how the government manipulated so many people with COVID and other things like that, I was just so done. I did not care to read this book. Just everything that she was talking about, George Floyd, everything like that was just annoying to me, and instantly I read probably like 10 pages of this and I just had to put it down. I could not do it anymore. It was intriguing a little bit at first, but I think because, like I said, I was getting myself into a slump, I just couldn't hang on to it. It wasn't intriguing enough. And then when she was talking about 2020, I really just did not want to hear about anything about that, because I want to read books to get out. Unless if I'm specifically reading a non-fiction book for one sole purpose, I want to not read about stuff in real life. And for this book, I felt like there was no reason to even have it technically. Let's go ahead and get into the actual monthly wrap up, and I'm going to have stats at the end of this, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the books and then what all pages they have or what I rated them. First, since I finished Fable at the end of February, I picked this one up, I think technically at the end of February, but I finished it March 2nd, and it has 357 pages. I rated this one, as well as with the first one, 5 stars. It was very much you jump into it because Fable ends on a cliffhanger and you jump straight into that cliffhanger, and pretty much it wasn't as much as the first book, but it was still very action-packed. Pretty much every page, it was just a very fast, great read in my opinion. Nothing dissatisfied me. I was very happy the whole time I read this book. I was very intrigued, even if I had to put it down and then do stuff during the day and then pick it back up at night. I love this book so much. The Last Legacy was next, and because of the fact that I thought this was Fable carrying on for a 3rd book, I thought there was going to be more action or something, and there was to a point. It just was a little bit less than the other books. It still was not bad. I rated it 4 stars, and it has 320 pages. It was just mainly because it's same world, a couple people are the same, but otherwise it's whole new people, but it was still a very great storyline in my opinion, and I thought it was very interesting. Next, at 213 pages is Max Lucado's 6 Hours One Friday. For me, I feel like most Christian books are either a 3 or a 4 star, just because they do help your faith, I feel like. And it was pretty interesting. A lot of the stories though I had already heard multiple times because they are more the common ones in the Bible. I pretty much knew what he was talking about, which was nice. It wasn't necessarily like too much regurgitated information, but for me, since I heard the story so many times and it was still a shorter, more fast-ish paced read, I think it was the book that started me getting out of reading for a hot minute, so I rated this one 3 stars. Next, we have a book that I actually read in probably elementary school, maybe middle school. I was obsessed with a lot of her books, and somebody recently that I was watching got this same book but as a graphic novel, and it made me realize I still have these books. I put them in my son's nursery a long time ago, so they've been in his room for a while, and at 184 pages, we have Wait Till Helen Comes. This book, definitely I could tell for a child middle school school. It was super easy, super kind of kiddish. It was a nice little read. I feel like it kind of helped me pull out of the slump because I read these after trying to read 2 other books. And I knew I was going to like this because this book, Deep, Dark, and Dangerous, and then A Doll in the Garden were my favorite books from her. So I've read this one and I rated this one 4 stars just because it was a fast read. It helped pull me out of my slump that I was starting to get into, and it was not bad at all. It was also nice to bring back the feeling of when I first read it. And since I'm older, I've retained different information from what I remember it as. Then we started a series that I think I only read the first or second book. I'm not sure if I ever read truly the second book, but now I am trying to finish that whole series. So we started on Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. This book was 4 stars at 309 pages. I already read it and I've seen the movies probably hundreds of times. Every Christmas they were on when I was a kid, but I did want to go ahead because these have all been sitting on my shelf and I've never read them, so I did want to pick this book up, or this whole series. So I started this series. I also feel like this one was more accurate to the movie, and as the books go along they get a little less accurate, at least so far of what I've read. I'm not gonna say they're 100% accurate. I just think with at least the first movie they did a pretty decent job. Then of course with 341 pages we have The Chamber of Secrets. This is book 2 or year 2 technically, and I rated this one 4 stars as well. I've been reading a lot of YA and fantasy in 2023. I mean, Fable was YA and fantasy, and then this technically falls under YA and fantasy. I enjoyed this book. I could see some differences between the movie and the book, of course, but I feel like it was a little bit more interesting. There was a couple things that I liked more that the movie did, which is a first for me, and then a couple things that the book was still very, very good about. Very intriguing, pretty much the whole storyline if you've ever seen the movies. I don't want to spoil necessarily anything, just in case for somebody who's never seen Harry Potter, never read the books. Then after my husband let me order a bunch of books, honestly, from thrift books and also on Amazon, I ended up picking up the first book, or point 5 in the Fable series, which is Saint, her father, and it's also about her mother. Honestly, I'm very glad I read this one after Fable. In my opinion, if you want to read the whole Fable series, I think the best way to read it is Fable, Namesake, Saint, and then The Last Legacy. And that is because in this book, if you retain information, you are going to get 2 different spoilers for book 1 or potentially book 2. I can't remember where, because it's one whole big giant story in my head. I can't remember exactly which book. I'm pretty sure it's in book 2 for both spoilers. I know for a fact one spoiler is in book 2. It's kind of like them lost on the sea for a hot minute, so it's kind of impertinent to not ruin that spoiler in my opinion. Definitely, I think reading this after Fable and Namesake was the best decision, even though I didn't mean to do that. I just never bought it until then. I absolutely love this book just as much as all the other books. Not as much as Fable and Namesake, but as much as The Last Legacy. It was still very awesome to basically read his little portion of his life, and I rated this 4 stars. It has 324 pages, and the ending to this book just ties up one big giant knot that makes total sense, which I wasn't necessarily blindsided by, but I didn't fully guess it, and I just absolutely love it. And that's another reason why I think reading this after Fable and Namesake was just so much better than if I would have spoiled that before. Just keep that in mind if you ever do read this, if you haven't read the other 2 first. And lastly, at 435 pages, we have Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and I rated this one 4 stars, just like the rest. I feel like all of her books pretty much are going to be 4 stars in this whole series. This one was a lot more different than the movie, and the movie Prisoner of Azkaban was my favorite movie, so seeing this one being a little bit different was not bad. This book helped make a lot of things click a lot more, because in the movie they leave out very important information that otherwise, if you didn't read this book, you may not have necessarily guessed. Like the whole knowing where Sirius actually was in the castle makes more sense at the end of this book. That way certain things with a certain animal can happen. I just really enjoyed this book as well as the other 2. Those are the 8 books I read this month. I said in my monthly wrap up last month that for the TBR for this month, I wanted to keep it very simple and not necessarily read a bunch of books. I wanted 5 at the max because I wanted to just calm down, because my goal is only 25, and currently I'm around around, I think 17 finished or 18 finished. I might be 18 finished now. So I'm very close to already hitting my goal, and it's only April 1st today as I'm filming this. I'm going to edit this and then post it tomorrow, Sunday the 2nd. So pretty much I read exactly what I wanted to, minus 2 books, and then I added a couple more on top of that. Let's go ahead and get into some of the stats that I do have. I recorded them onto my phone so I didn't have to necessarily try and do all the math or anything else right here. I read 8 books this month. We already covered that, but I read 2,483 pages within those 8 books. My smallest book by page numbers is Wait Till Helen Comes with 184 pages. My longest book by pages is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban with 435 pages. In all honesty, my favorite book I read this month has to be pretty much my only 5-star read this whole month. So that is Namesake. Like I said, you just jump right into the action again, and it was just so amazing. So we're going to say this was my favorite. And lastly, we are going to cover the different genres I read this month, which I kind of touched on a little bit. So I read 6 YA/fantasies this month, and I read 1 Christian and 1 fiction. The 1 fiction was Wait Till Helen Comes. The last part of this video is my April TBR, and it should come to no surprise that I am going to hold up all of these books. We have the rest of the Harry Potter series, and I probably will not finish this whole series by the time the month ends out. First, I'm currently reading The Goblet of Fire. This is book 4, and honestly, this paperback, because I have 2 more paperbacks left, this one is 740 pages, kind of a lot. I didn't think it was going to be that much, even though it is a little thicker. Next, we have The Order of the Phoenix. This is 830 pages, so an extra pretty much 100 pages on top. So it is a thick one too. At 652, we have The Half-Blood Prince. This is the start of my hardcovers. I might end up, after reading my paperbacks, read a standalone book in between, and that's to be determined on if I need it or not. I kind of did that with Saint in between The Prisoner of Azkaban and the 2nd book. So I might do that in between The Half-Blood Prince and The Order of the Phoenix. It all depends, because those are pretty thick books. Then we have at 759 pages, The Deathly Hallows. Lastly, at 308 pages is The Cursed Child. Since there is no movie, and also since I've never actually read the series, never read this book, this will be completely new to me without any spoilers at all. So I am kind of excited to get to this. I seen on Goodreads, most of the Harry Potters are like 4.2 on up. They're very high rated, I feel like. And then I think this one's in the 3 stars, maybe like mid 3s, which is kind of interesting. I wonder what necessarily she did. I know a lot of the time when an author finishes a series and then they include 1 extra book, it's always kind of like, why would you even do this? Why not just let it be? I'm not sure if that's all the reviews are about, if it's kind of like it was unnecessary. I don't necessarily want to read them because I don't want to spoil this book for me. I remember when it came out, it took me a while to get it, and then when I finally got it, I just had never read actual Harry Potter, and I wanted to wait till the end. So now I finally get to do that. I hope you guys all enjoyed the 15 books I showed in this video. I'm not going to try and hold all of the books up at once because just the 7 or 8 Harry Potter books are pretty heavy, so I can imagine if I added an extra 7 or 8 books to that. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I'll see y'all next week, and God bless.